Welcome, Elliott Rae.
Obviously, there are stereotypes around black dads.
I don't think I've ever heard my dad full out say, I love you.
I don't think my dad has either, to be honest. And, you know, every night we get stopped by police 3 or 4 times. I think it's so important for like young boys to have a strong dad at home. You know, they pulled out a gun and put it to my head and yeah. I think at that moment you really realise that like as soon as your baby comes out, you're a parent. Like literally it doesn't start the next day, it starts straight away. And I think for the first time in my adult life, feeling completely helpless. You know when you're crying so much, you're like, where are these tears coming from? Like, how am I still crying? Nothing can compare to that night, the most difficult night of our lives by far. That was just a trigger, man. Like, all the stuff I hadn't dealt with, it all just came back.
Welcome to the Dadvengers podcast, sponsored by Tonka, because being tough is all about getting out and playing. I'm Nigel Clark, TV presenter and performer, and I'm also host of this wonderful podcast where we explore different aspects of parenting and hone in on the dad point of view. And mums, grandparents, carers, we want you involved in the conversation too. So let's talk, let's laugh, let's share the things we find difficult and become the type of dads we really want to be. Today's guest is a fellow advocate for supporting dads, having set up the online platform Music Football Fatherhood after going through a very traumatic introduction to being a dad. We're so pleased to have him here. Welcome, Elliott Rae.
Hey Nigel, thanks for having me.
Dude, glad you could be here. Glad you could be here. I think it's important to hear your story, what you're doing, all of that. You're a inspirational dad, definitely.
Oh, thank you. Well, the fact you invited me back after the IG live, you know, I must have done something right.
Dude, yeah, definitely. Definitely. That was great that you could come along to one of our dad chats with our kind of like Dadvengers community. That's where our core peeps are at. But I think your story needs to get out to a wider range of people, which is why you're here on this podcast. So let's go all the way back. Let's start with you growing up. Your parents emigrated here, yeah?
Mm.
Where were they from?
So my dad's from Grenada in the West Indies, Caribbean, and my mum's from an island not far away from Grenada, St. Vincent. But they met each other in Wembley.
Really?
In Wembley, yeah. My dad actually came over when he was 14, and my mum came over when she was 7. And my mum, they lived in Tottenham, in Hackney. Sorry, they lived in Hackney in Stoke Newington, and then they moved to Tottenham. And my dad's family came to Wembley, where I grew up in West London.
Nice. I mean, not far from where I'm based, to be fair, because Tottenham's down the road and Wembley's down the other side. I'm sort of near the North Circular, so right between both places that you've mentioned there. So what was it like growing up with parents who'd immigrated, who, you know, were from an ethnic background here in the UK at a time when things were a little bit different to now? Well, arguably.
It was good. I had a good childhood. In the area I grew up in the school I went to, especially the secondary school, was just very mixed, to be honest. It had people from all different backgrounds, in terms of race, in terms of class as well. And I'm really thankful for that, actually. I think what that meant is that like I was exposed to just a variety of different people.
Yeah. And
I think now that means I can generally find something in common with most people, to be honest, because I've been around, you know, the worst and seen poverty and seen hardship.
Yeah.
Through just, you know, friends and family, but also been lucky enough to be around some people that are quite wealthy and I've lived a good life. And I think I was always kind of in the middle somewhere. You know, my mum and dad were very hardworking. My dad never took a sick day off ever in his whole career. He never took a day off sick. So he was very much a kind of hard worker. And you know, when he came over from Grenada, he always tells me that it was him and his brother, his younger brother, a couple of years younger, they shared the front room in the house. So that was their bedroom. The front room downstairs was their bedroom. But my grandma always had like people over, so she would always have guests over, and even during the week. So they would say they had to wait until the guests left, and then they would pull out the sofa bed to go to bed and had school the next day. So when me and my sister had our own bedrooms, he was like, you've got your own bedroom. I'm thinking, yeah, doesn't everyone? But for him, that's a big deal, we've got our own bedroom. So he was always like, making sure that we took advantage of the opportunities that we had. And I had a paper round. I've always worked. As soon as I had a national insurance number, I got a job in Iceland, the local supermarket. And just worked really hard. And I think that work ethic that my
back
parents,
then, wouldn't it have been called B-Jams or something back then?
No, it was still Iceland. I'm not that old.
So wait, your dad was a very hard worker, as a lot of men were at that time, going out early, coming back late. How present was he in the whole parenting journey with you and your siblings?
Yeah, he was present. I remember on a Wednesday he'd pick us up. I remember he got this red, I think it was a Cavalier, Ford Cavalier, this red car.
Dude, my dad had a Vauxhall Cavalier.
Vauxhall Cavalier, that's it.
Vauxhall Cavalier, and my dad's was yellow.
So yeah, he picked us up on a Wednesday, and I always remember, oh my God, like Dad's coming with the red car. And on a Wednesday he used to pick us up. So yeah, he was around. Obviously, my mum was part-time, so she was like the main carer, I guess. But my dad was always around. He was a big presence.
So Dad was around, but specific days, maybe not as much as you are with your kids now.
Yeah.
Different time, different way of doing things. But he instilled things in you, I'm assuming. Was he strict?
He was strict, yeah. Very, very strict. Yeah, he was traditional Grenadian man, I guess.
Yeah, if you're from the Caribbean, you come with a different set of rules, don't you?
Yeah, and it's weird because there are stereotypes around black dads and whatnot, but that generation, there was a certain type of strict man, who they didn't play around, and hard work and manners, behaving yourself, that was was a non-negotiable. Your manners, your pleases, your thank yous, your respect for your elders, the hard work, the integrity, all that sort of stuff was just the basics. That was the foundation. That wasn't anything to be celebrated. Yeah. That was just what my dad expected us to do. And it's a weird one because I think I've taken a lot of that, and I think I instill a lot of that. But at the same time, I'm definitely, as a dad, a lot more free. And I think with my daughter, I've got one daughter, she's 5 years old. I let her express herself a lot more than I was able to. And I think that's important, isn't it? Because you realize when you get older and you go into the workplace and stuff like that, you need to be able to express yourself. You need to be confident. Authority is, of course, important, but you can't be scared of authority. You've got to be able to chat and talk with authority, and it's important. Yeah,
I get that. I definitely get that. You talk about giving your little one expression and that whole side of things. Was your dad expressive emotionally? How much did he show his love? Because that's another thing that men from that generation maybe struggled with a little bit more. What was your dad like?
Yeah, exactly as you say. Not overly expressive of emotions. Didn't see any vulnerability, to be honest. Really.
Yeah, because for me, just to put it out there and show you where I'm coming from, because I think we come from the same place. I don't think I've ever heard my dad full out say, "I love you."
Wow.
I mean, I know he loves me. Don't get me wrong, but for him to come out with those words blatant, that's a tough thing for him to do.
Yeah, I don't think my dad has either, to be honest.
See?
Yesterday he texted me and said, "Well done," and that was a big deal.
Big deal.
Because he saw me
Yeah.
on TV and he said, well done. And that's massive. I've got a well done. That's big. That's like testing the boundaries. We're getting emotional here.
Exactly. It's a different generation, especially as Caribbean dads. I remember the first time he came to see me in Stomp. So this is like in the West End or something, or maybe actually first time he might have come abroad when we were touring or something. And he came to see the show and squeezed some sort of nearly well done. Like, yeah, it's good, but there's a but. There was always a little but there. But couldn't you have done this or that? Couldn't you have done that? It's like, no, not really. Kind of that's the way the show rolls.
Where are your parents from?
So my parents are Guyanese, both of them from Guyana, but met here in the UK. So yeah, I know where you're coming from. I've lived a similar life. When you were young, let's say teenagers, did you have an experience with racism, with crime, with anything like that?
Yeah. I started to drive at 17. I got my driving license at 17. So I was the first within my friends. So, there'll be like 5 of us, black boys, just driving on a Saturday night through wherever. And, every night we get stopped by police 3 or 4 times. Just standard, and you start realizing you're like, okay, cool. Why are you stopping me with no reason?
Yeah.
And they're surprised when I have a license. I show them my license. They can't believe I've got a license and insurance, right? But yeah, I get stopped by police all the time.
Yeah.
And those sort of things, those things kind of happening, and then kind of getting involved with some of the wrong people and being in some situations I shouldn't have been in at all. But so I think from those formative years, which I think being a black boy in London is quite hard to navigate, and I think it's I just thank God that I've had a strong dad at home actually, who, even though he wasn't there obviously when I'm out, he was always there in my mind. So certain decisions that I was making, I always knew, what about my family? What about my dad? Like, I come from a good family. Do you know what I mean? Like, great grandparents, uncles are, good people. And I didn't want to me and my cousin didn't want to bring shame on the family. So having that strong background at home, it really does, it does a lot. It informs your decisions, and who you are. And I think it's so important for like young boys to have a strong dad at home who has that right balance of love, but also discipline, to just try and guide you in the right direction, and make sure you keep your integrity and your morals and certain things about you. And then, and with luck as well. And then you kind of get through those years. But it is hard for, like, when I see young black boys in London, and that, just sometimes going out, you're gonna, whether it's the police, whether it's other boys, there's hazards around, and it's not always easy for them. So they do need guidance and help and support.
Did you ever have any life-changing experiences growing up? Any threats to your life? Did you ever fear for your life?
So there's one part I wrote about in the book. Being 19, I said getting involved in some of the wrong people. I got to take responsibility. Some of it was my fault as well. 2 different groups of people that didn't really like each other much, and I was in the middle, and I was friends with them both, and whatnot. And one particular incident where there was a lot of people from my school in the park this day, and this group thought I was involved with the other group, and whatnot had happened, and they pulled out a gun and put it to my head, and and I got, like, there was a scuffle and got beaten up, and it was quite serious, and I remember that moment where you think, oh my gosh, like, this person that is doing this, I know he's a serious person. This is not, this person is a serious guy. I know what he's done before. Like, this could go the wrong way. And in that moment, you're not necessarily scared. It's just kind of like, it's a weird kind of peace, to be honest. It's a weird kind of calm, really. Like, it's not all kind of panic. It's a calm. But that moment, the reason that shaped me was not just the incident of, like, the shock of having a gun pulled out on you and threatening with your life. I think for me, over and above that, it was the fact that there were quite a few people from my school that were there at the time. They weren't actually there, but they were around the corner. So a lot of people from my school were present. It was a hot day, it was in the park. There was loads of people there, basically, and everyone kind of knew what had happened. So for me, it was like a real thing of like, wow, a lot of people that I know, bring on when I was 19, you know, at that age, you've got a big ego. Your reputation is very important to you. And something that's quite embarrassing, to be honest. Like, forget the threat of my life. It was more like, I just feel embarrassed. Do you know what I mean? That this happened. That is what was the bigger deal, actually.
Wow.
And the fact that, you know, the weeks afterwards, leaving the house and feeling like everyone's laughing at you, you know, feeling like everyone's like, like that's, you know, and that took a long time to overcome, to be honest.
Dude, it's so strange that you say that, because a lot of people are probably sitting at home thinking, okay, wait, hold on. The real moment right there would be like, not the embarrassment, but I've had a gun pulled on me. Shouldn't your friends be coming up to you saying, are you okay? Are you okay? Blah, blah, blah. Rather than, look what happened to you, mate. You stepped out of line at the wrong time, and that's what happened to you. Because most people wouldn't think about the embarrassment side of things, but that's where you were, and that's the position you were in, right?
Yeah, and a lot of time when you see these things happening, a lot of time that's the root cause, is that something happens to someone, they feel like their ego's taking a hit, they're embarrassed, so now they go and retaliate, you know, and it's that you've disrespected me
In front of people.
In front of people, and everyone knows. So I need to go and do this now, and that's how things escalate. And it could be something that starts quite small, but the disrespect is a massive thing, you know, for young people. And your reputation at that age is everything, and your ego is everything. And so for me, yeah, the overriding thing of just the shock of it had happened, there wasn't that. It was more just like, oh my gosh, like everyone knows, you know, like everyone's seen it. If it happened in private where no one knew, maybe it wouldn't have had such a big impact on me. But it was a fact that there were people that I thought were friends that were there. So that was a really tough summer, to be honest. That was a really, really tough summer. And there was lots of nights that I go like, just sitting at home thinking, like, what am I gonna do? You know, what am I going to do now? There's some people saying you should retaliate and do X, Y, or Z. Cleveland wasn't gonna ever do that, but some people were saying we can go and do this. That's just not me at all. So that was never an option. But what am I going to do? How am I going to, in what you feel like is your whole life has crumbled, how do I continue now? And so for me, it was like, okay, cool. I'm not gonna fight you because I'm not that way inclined, and I know who you are, and that's not gonna end. So I'm not gonna do that, basically. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna like work really hard to make something of myself, and my like revenge is I'm gonna show you that, okay, cool, you did this, but you haven't won, you know, and I'm gonna be successful, and you're gonna see my success, and in years to come, you're gonna look back and be like, oh, that's Elliott. He, you know,
I pulled a gun on
people. Exactly, basically, yeah. And he probably says it now, to be fair, but yeah, it's not just a person, but the people around as well. You know, like who didn't stick up for me or didn't check if I was okay, and you know, maybe they were scared as well, or whatever. But I was like, cool, don't worry, I'm gonna work really hard, and I think, you know, through that has been a lot of my motivation. I don't know if it's good or not. I talked to my wife about it a lot, and I think it's becoming not so much now. But in my 20s, early 30s, it was a motivation. It was like, you know, I'm a hardworking person anyway, but like I need to prove to people that I'm going to make something of myself.
So that increased your work ethic.
I think it did, yeah.
We are so happy to have Tonka as our sponsor this series. Basic Fun's Tonka collection is packed full of fun vehicles for kids who want to get out and get tough with their toys. So dads, you've got no excuse. Grab that mighty steel classic truck. It's time to head to the sandpit for some tough play. So you had your good 20s, you got to 30s, you settled down with your wife. It's time to have children. She gets pregnant, and it gets to, you know, closer to birth time. And then you have quite a traumatic experience, don't you? Introduction to becoming a father. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the pregnancy was all good. It was all smooth. Obviously, my wife was having like, you know, symptoms of pregnancy, but there was nothing to worry about. It was nothing out of the ordinary or anything like that. But 8.5 months in, after a kind of routine check for something else, we got a letter. I remember it was like this. It was like, you know, like a restaurant pamphlet come through the door. I thought, was this a new chicken shop or something? It was like $2.99 chicken and chips deal. It was the hospital, and it was like a note saying basically, you know, we found Group B strep, which is a common infection. I think like 1 in 4 pregnant women will carry this infection. It's very common. Normally, it's not harmful to the baby, but if the baby contracts it, it's very serious. 1 in 10 babies die. Another 1 in 10 will get a lifelong disability from contracting meningitis. So obviously we were worried. We were like, I've never heard of this Group B strep. What's this? So we did our research, and then obviously when you do research, you worry even more because you find out how serious it is. So so basically the solution to it is you get intravenous antibiotics during labour. So I remember the labour started about 4 a.m. in the morning on Saturday morning. Went to the hospital. After a few hours, you know, dilations and contractions got bigger, and they started the antibiotics, and we were in this kind of like side room, birthing room, which was quite nice. Had a birthing pool. It was quite calm, serene, cool. It was all going fine. And after a few hours, I think they were finding like our baby's heart rate was going up and down and whatnot. So they were a bit worried. So they said, okay, we're gonna take you into the actual labour ward. Cool. So we go in there, and that's when I guess it got quite serious, because our baby's heart rate was dropping. My wife's blood pressure was going up and down. The labour didn't seem to be moving on, kind of stagnating. Wife was in a lot of pain. That lasted for a good 20 hours. Now we're coming to like Sunday morning. There's been a couple of heart rate scares where the midwife will just push this button, and then before you know it, there's 10 doctors in the room. Yeah. You're thinking, where have you come from? Were you just waiting outside? Like literally, I was like, where have you come from?
Yeah.
Were you just chilling outside the room? But yeah, press the button, and literally within 10 seconds, they're just all running in. And I remember it felt like Casualty. When you're seeing that happening, Casualty, it was literally like that. Like they run in, and then they check in, and they put like something else on my wife's belly where they're checking the heart rate and all these sort of things. So that happened, I think, twice. Anyway, it comes to the end where the baby's kind of coming out now, and it's taking a while. The baby's not really coming out, so the doctors are getting concerned. They get a ventouse, which is an instrument you use as assisted delivery to bring the baby out. So bearing in mind now it's like 4 a.m. Sunday morning. We've been up since like Friday night, and when my daughter comes out, babies are supposed to cry and be full of life, but she's grey, she's not breathing properly, she's barely alive basically. At the same time, my wife is losing a lot of blood, so the doctors are like, out of nowhere again, there's probably like 7-8 doctors around my wife, tending to her, trying to stop blood flow. They're thinking that we're gonna have to do transfusion, all that sort of stuff. And then on the other side, my daughter's there, and there's doctors walking on her. They're trying to suck fluid out of her windpipe and that sort of thing. And yeah, it's just at that moment where you're just thinking, wow, like
you feel like you're in a film, you're in a movie somewhere that like you don't need to be.
Basically, you feel like I remember I always feel like I was just watching it. I felt like I was a fly on the wall, literally. I don't feel like I was there. It's more like you're watching yourself and you're just watching it all. And it's like literally you're watching a movie. It felt like that. Like you're watching a film and you're just kind of looking. You're not saying anything. I don't know if I was breathing. You're just kind of watching and thinking, like, this wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't expected. No one. This wasn't a part of the script, kind of thing. Like, what's going on? Yeah, thank God, my baby daughter, started breathing again, and they were like, okay, cool. She has to go to intensive care. They think she's contracted this infection. So they put her in this incubator, and I remember the doctor said to me, like, what do you want to do? Do you want to go? Or do you want to stay with your wife? And I'm like, okay, I better go. Do you know what I mean? Like, the daughter's 5 minutes old by this point. And I think that's when,
Awful choice to have to make, just like
and
in rushed as well. It's just like, what do you do? Anyway, carry on.
yeah, and I think at that moment you really realize that, like, as soon as your baby comes out, you're a parent. Like, literally, it doesn't start the next day; it starts straight away. Like, literally, you're a parent, you're a dad now, and your responsibilities start now. You have a responsibility. So yeah, I remember I said to my wife, I'll be back. And I remember walking away thinking, she's in a bad way, man. Do you know what I mean? Like, the doctors were worried, and you're thinking, it's at that moment where you're thinking, like, you don't want to think it, but you're thinking, am I going to come back to my wife? Do you know what I mean? Because she's in a bad way, and they're worried about her. So I remember walking down this corridor now, and I wrote, it's so vivid, these white walls, this long corridor. Walking down this corridor now. And I think for the first time in my adult life, just feeling completely helpless. And just feeling completely helpless. Like, literally like a child. I felt like a child. And I remember I was trying to call my mum. There was no reception at the time. But I felt like a baby, like a child. I felt like that toddler feeling where you just, you're helpless in a situation you can't do anything about what's going on. I felt like that. I felt like a baby. And we're walking around this long hall, and we got to the NICU, which is intensive care, neonatal intensive care. And there was a woman there, one of the nurses. I remember she just looked at me. I can't remember if she shook me or not, but she looked at me dead in the eye, and she was like, "You need to be present. Like,
you need to wake up.
You need to wake
Elliot,
up.
you need to... You might not even remember it. She might have slapped you. She might have been like,
baby, it felt like
wake
a slap.
up.
It felt like a slap. It felt like she had slapped me. And I was like, literally, that was the moment. It was like, I'm sure she's seen it before, so I'm sure.
Yeah, of course.
So I think she knew what she was doing, but it was like bringing me back. And at that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm here. Like, I've got to be present. I can't just be like drifting through this. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not a passenger. I've got to engage with it. Like, this is happening. Don't feel sorry for yourself. Get on with it. Like, you have a role here. So I really appreciate that. That's what I needed. And then they started like giving my daughter antibiotics. She had loads of wires in her and whatnot. She's in an incubator, and then they're explaining what it is, and the doctors are consulting. So I remember just sitting there for a little while, like, once they'd finished doing what they were doing, and she was just in the incubator, and they were monitoring, and she was connected to all these machines and whatnot. And I remember just sitting in there, and this time it's like 5 a.m. So there's no one else. There's lots of other babies in there. Basically, NICU, there's loads of babies in incubators. There's no other parents at this time, at this stage. And we're just sitting there. There's a few nurses around and stuff like that. What is going on? And maybe after, I don't know how long it was, half an hour, I'll go back to see my wife, and she's okay. She's lying down. She's there. And just, I remember she was awake, and I was saying to her, I was in a NICU and trying to explain with her what has happened.
So how long did you have to be going to NICU and having those consultations and all of that with your daughter? How long did it all last?
So that happened for 2 weeks, and with GBS, basically, like with any infection, antibiotics work to reduce it. But there were times when the infection marker was going up, and and it was supposed to be going down, so it was quite worrying. Or it was going down, that was good. So it was like, a couple of days we had good news and a couple of days bad news, and that was a bit of a roller coaster. But overall, the doctors, it's quite a common infection, so the doctors weren't overly concerned about it. I think they still had belief it would be okay. So even though it was a difficult 2 weeks, and it was an up and down, we felt like it was going to be positive, I think, for the most part. And to be honest, I didn't think too much. I was in business mode. I was just in protect your family, advocate for your family. I don't think I really thought too much about worst case scenarios. Yeah, I didn't, to be honest. There's no time. Every 2 hours there's someone in your room taking you. There was no time to think. So it was more just about doing what you got to do. And then we got the good news after 2 weeks that we could go home, which was amazing. But then crazily, like, a couple of hours later, my daughter just developed this bump in the back of her head. Quite a big bump. Out of nowhere. Just after we got the news that we could go home. So that was that's when I feel like it got serious. Like when the doctors are worried, and bearing in mind for those 2 weeks, like in that room, we would have to go and get our food, want a cup of tea, we go to the canteen, which is in the labour ward, but we go and get the thing or whatever. And the staff, they knew us by now, it was like we're part of the furniture, whatever. When we got that news, that's when we saw a special paediatric doctor came in from another hospital to come see us at a meeting. And the midwives were worried. They came in. We didn't have to go and get our dinner that day. They came and brought our dinner to us. They came and changed our bed sheets. They
So
came
you knew
and
something
make
was
us
different.
Yeah, they were even the way they were looking at us. Do you know what I mean? Like the vibe changed. They were worried. By this point, they know us pretty well because we've just been living there for 2 weeks. So we see them every day. Like, so they became friends. Like, they were concerned, and the doctors were worried. And basically, they were like, "You got to have an emergency MRI scan the next day." So that night, nothing can compare to that night. The most difficult night of our lives by far. Nothing can compare. Like, we prayed and cried for hours. Literally. When you're crying so much, you're like, where are these tears coming from? Like, how am I still crying? Like 5 hours later, not just like, just flowing. Because I think by that point it was like, I'd kept it in. I didn't cry for that, apart from in the birth, and I didn't cry for those 2 weeks. I held it in, get on with it. Yeah, that was just that night, and then the next day, early, first thing, went to the MRI scan, and yeah, that was tough. I had to put her in this little machinery and whatnot, and go back to the room and just wait. Basically, like I think the doctors thought it might have been like a brain tumor or something like that. So, at that moment, we're just waiting, thinking, what's the rest of our lives going to be like? Basically, like this news is pretty important news we're about to get. And then the doctor just ran through. Like I remember, they would never knock; they'll just burst through the door. Basically, there was times I was in my boxer shorts, having a shower. The doctor's just bursting in. Okay, no privacy. It's fine. Whatever. We're family now. But yeah, came bursting through the door, and I remember she just ran up to us like this, like we're celebrating like Sterling's goal in the Euros. It was like that. It came up to us celebrating, it hugged us. And she's like, "Oh, don't have to worry. It's just like bone structure. It's fine. It's fine." And we were just like, "Oh my gosh!" Like that feeling, that elation.
Yeah.
And just hugging the nurse, and yeah, at that point they got to know us. So I think they were on that emotional journey with us. So when they got the news, they were genuinely happy. This wasn't like a professional. This was like a human being. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who was genuinely happy for people, good people that they'd met. So yeah, so we stayed a couple of more days just to make sure it was okay, and then
and you got to go home.
We got to go home, yeah, and that was a mad moment. But I think that's when the next the next phase of it started. Yeah.
Tell us about the next phase, mate. Tell us about the next phase.
Yeah, so the next phase was like getting home, and as soon as we left the hospital, like we were paranoid. Do you know what I mean? Like even though that moment had passed, in our minds, we were still kind of there.
Yeah, you're on tenterhooks now.
Yeah, we were just paranoid about everything. And I remember, it was funny actually, because when we were about to leave, Snelly, my wife, was like, "Can you check our baby's temperature?" And I checked the temperature in the room. And then we got out to the reception to say goodbyes. And then my wife was like, "Can you check the temperature again?" And they're like, "It's okay, we checked it 10 minutes ago." She's like, "Can you check it again?" And I checked it again, it was the same temperature. Like, but you could see the anxiousness, right? Like, and we went home, and I had a few days left at home of my paternity leave, and I was back to work full time. And I guess what I did, I just threw myself into work, into parenting, and started Music Football Fatherhood. I started writing after a couple of months, not about what happened, just keeping myself busy. I threw myself into everything. Like I was just keeping busy, and I think threw myself into parenting. I'd go work and then come home and just do everything around the house. I was like a madman. I'd come home, clean, cook, like have my daughter, like. And I think part of that was knowing that my wife, she ended up getting diagnosed with postnatal anxiety, so knowing that she was struggling, but also as a way, I think, of me not processing what had happened really, and trying to block it all out and just kind of get on with it. So yeah, so that kind of went on for a few months, to be honest, and yeah, we didn't really leave the house a lot in those first few months. It was winter, and I think because we were just so paranoid, like we were like literally in A&E like every week for about the first 3 months. I think we were in A&E not every week. I think we were about like eight or nine times. We went to A&E literally because we were just so worried. Every time she had a temperature once, or there was various different things, we were just so worried. So like 3 o'clock in the morning, we'll just be in A&E, like literally. And you think other things, their parents would be like, "Oh, I'll be fine," you know. For us, because we were so anxious and paranoid, every little thing we would go to the hospital. I remember like being at work and then like, "How are you?" It's like, "Oh, it's all right. Yeah, I was in hospital last night at 3 a.m." Like, you know, and they're like, "Oh, why?" And like, you know. But yeah, so basically that lasted for a few months. Um, and I felt like I was doing okay. I felt like I was all right. I remember feeling okay, to be honest. Like I didn't process what had happened, but I was all right. And then basically what happened after a few months, my daughter had she's got a wheat allergy, quite a bad wheat allergy. She's got an EpiPen now and stuff like that. But obviously we didn't know at the time. We gave her Weetabix, and remember we'd gone out on Sunday, gone to Nando's, my favorite restaurant. um, so we've gone there, gone home, and gave my daughter some Weetabix before bed. And then we went into the living room, and literally within like 2 minutes, her face had just doubled in size.
Wow.
Her eyes are like literally, you know, like you see a rugby player that's been beaten up, or like a
Yeah.
wrestler or a boxer. It was like that. Her eyes were swelled over. Her face was like out of the blue, and we're like, "What is going on?" So we called the ambulance, rushed to the hospital. I remember that day was crazy because that day it was quite a hot day, and apparently I only found out after there was a death in the A&E that day. So it was mad. There was like pregnant women sitting on the floor at Which Cross Hospital. It was mad, but they prioritized us. They took us through. We walked through all these people. They gave us a room and a bed, and then started treating my daughter. And like again, like in the hospital experience, you know it's serious when you get prioritized and you get special people coming to see you.
Allergic reaction for the minor. That's big.
Yeah, serious. So, and for me at that point, that was just a trigger, man. Like all the stuff I hadn't dealt with, it all just came back. And the months after that, like I didn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. I was just up all night. If I slept, I would have nightmares, or I'd be scared I would have a nightmare. Um, I was having flashbacks about birth, uh, just emotional. Like I think I said in that BBC piece, you know, there was one time when I was on the train, just in tears, just crying. Like I just didn't know what was going on. And I think what happened was at the time, because I didn't know what was going on, the worry of it made it even worse. So I'm thinking, why don't I feel myself? Why can't I communicate properly? Why am I crying for no reason? Why am I worried? Why can't I sleep? Like I didn't know what was going on. So then
All
that
big
made it
flags now that you look back.
exactly. And yeah, so that lasted for maybe like a good few months, the severe symptoms. And then over time, kinda I remember we went on holiday to Cambridge, and I remember sitting down at the river thinking, okay, cool, I'm starting to feel a little bit better. I'm starting to feel a bit more myself. And I was able to kind of reflect on a little bit of what happened and stuff like that. And that was an important. But it was only a break. I think we went for like a week or something. But I remember it was really hot, and yeah, I could slow down and kind of think about what was going on and whatnot. And over time,
Process.
yeah, I started to process it, and over time, kind of started feeling a little bit more myself and whatnot. Um, so at that time, I didn't actually get any. I didn't think at that point to go and seek help. It's crazy. Even though like my wife had got counselling for postnatal anxiety earlier on, I never in my mind thought, oh, maybe I should like talk to someone a professional about this, which is crazy now, but a lot of men do it. Like yesterday, we recorded a podcast about birth trauma, and the dads were saying the same thing.
Yeah. Literally, we were recording a podcast about trauma yesterday as well, and some of the same things. Some of the same things were coming up about not dealing with it. ignoring it, throwing themselves into other things, or a lot of the things that you've mentioned here today that you exhibited, yeah, same things.
Yeah. So the months go by, and then I started to feel like myself a little bit more, and I'm kind of getting back to myself and whatnot. But at the same time, thinking about the birth is very difficult. And I remember talking to, so at this point, I'm doing Music Football Fatherhood now, and there was a lady called Anna who started a platform around mental health for parents, mainly for mums, and she wanted to interview me for, it's a magazine, and she wanted to do an interview with me and stuff like that. And we met, and then she was asking about the birth, and like I couldn't even talk about it like I'm talking about it now. Do you know what I mean? Like without, she could see that clearly.
It was emotional.
It was emotional, and so she recommended that I kind of speak to someone who she was working with, who's a birth trauma specialist and whatnot. And yeah, we had that conversation, and I told her about what had happened and the aftermath and what I was feeling and experiencing, and she was like, "Yeah, it sounds like basically you had PTSD."
And that was the first time you heard and knew what you'd been going through.
Yeah. And yeah, so I spoke to her and whatnot, and that was cool. But at that point, I was feeling a little bit better anyway. I was kind of coming out on the other end. I was more myself, and I was cool.
Listen, before I let you go, I want to touch upon Music Football Fatherhood and all the work that you're doing there, and how it, just briefly, how it kind of came about and grew out of what you were going through and how you were letting it out by writing blog posts and stuff. When was it that you realised, actually, this is really important, Music Football Fatherhood? Because it started with just blog posts?
Yeah. It was just like elliottray.com at the very beginning. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just writing. I didn't know anything about like SEO or anything like that. I was just literally writing on WordPress. And then after a few months, I was like, okay, actually, you know what? I was just like, what do I like about life? What do I love? And music, football, and fatherhood are just my passion. So it was very kind of selfish at the beginning. It was very much like, what would I like to see as a new dad who used to be in a band, who loves football, loves fatherhood? Like, what would I like to see? And it was very much just like that, creating something that I wanted for myself, basically. And then like, yeah, a couple of dads got involved and started writing and joined the kind of team, which was cool. And then, yeah, later on, I kind of thought, okay, this could be something. So kind of tried to rebrand, got Canva, which is an online tool, and just did a little logo, and got WordPress.org, and made it a little bit more professional. And then the following year, so we're in 2017 now, summer, I was me and my wife both had a week off, and we were in Harrow in a coffee shop. And I remember, I think I was like writing a press release, and I wasn't really working. And then I think my wife was like, Snelly, she was like, why don't you just write about like your experiences or whatnot of being a black dad and stuff like that. And at that point, I was like, I worked part-time, I did compressed hours, I had my daughter a lot, basically. So I was going to like baby groups with her and whatnot. And just, it was quite funny actually, just being sometimes the only black man at the baby groups, and what that experience was like and whatnot. So I kind of wrote a piece about that, basically. And like, I believe in God, I'm a Christian, and I literally feel like God wrote that article for me, because it took about 5 minutes.
This is the I'm a young married professional black father and I don't exist piece that went viral.
Yeah, I literally wrote it in like 5 minutes. I don't remember writing it. I don't consciously remember. I remember sitting down and writing it, but I don't consciously remember thinking about it. Anyway, so my wife was like, read it. It's like, oh, that's great. Like, she sent it to Independent. I was like, okay, how do I do that? So she found the editor's email address on Twitter, and I emailed. And then within an hour, they were like, it's great. Can we put it on the internet, on their website? I'm like, cool. So within like, from me finishing writing it, I would say about 2 hours later, it was up on the website. And over the next day, it was the second most viewed article on their website, on the Independent's website. Wow. It was second to a Brexit Trump article. Damn Brexit. But anyway, so yeah, it was the second most viewed article, and I think that was like the real starting point. That's when it got shared 17,000 times, which maybe now is not so much, but in 2017 that was quite a lot in like a day and a half. And after that, yeah, the team built. I think we then got a team of like 10, and then we did a BBC feature, and they were like, "This is the Mum's Net for Dads." That was a couple months later, and then the team grew, and I think we had a team like 25 at that point.
Wow.
2017, yeah. So I was like getting a writing team on board and whatnot. But yeah, at that point, it's a weird one because I wasn't ready for that level of attention. But then after that, I kind of started to take it more seriously, really. Even though I was working hard on it, I kind of thought, okay, if I want to make this a thing that I want to do, I need to think about how it's going to work. So yeah, took some time just to do that, basically, and really try and figure out exactly what we are trying to do. What kind of dad do we want to engage with? How are we going to engage with them? What do we believe in? And that's taken a while to really kind of crystallize and get very focused. And I feel like it's taken a while, but now I'm very clear about what we stand for.
Yeah, so you're doing amazing work. You're doing really amazing work, and it's great to see, and it's great to share this space with you as Dadvengers, because we're of a similar mindset, and we're trying to do this similar thing for dads. So yeah, it's good. It's good to be around good people like you.
Exactly, and I think like it's so good that we can work together, you know, because I think sometimes people would see people doing similar things and be like, oh, that's competition. And I think when you look at the amount of platforms there are for mums, there's not that many platforms for dads, and there's millions of dads.
Listen, one question before you go. We ask all of our guests, and it's the big one. This is it. If you could have a dad superpower, what would it be and why?
Oh, what would it be? What would it be?
Go on, let's see what you got.
So do you know what? It might sound soppy or weird, but if I had the power to make my daughter happy all the time, like...
Good one.
Sometimes I see her... Basically, something quite bad happened. My father-in-law died in February, and my daughter grieved, and seeing her grieve was so tough. Like, people were like, she's 5, she won't get it. Like, she was grieving. She was crying all night. She was sad at school. And all I wanted to do was like, I just want you to be happy. I just want you to be content. You know, when your kids are content and happy, you're just like, it's all cool. You know, just be happy. Like, so one of my superpowers would be like, you know, she's still going through a bit of that as well. Like, she's still finding it tough. So one superpower would be like, look, you just be happy. If I had the power to do that, that'd be cool.
Listen, Elliott, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. You're doing amazing work. Keep it up, and let's catch up soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Elliott, a dad doing important things, supporting the fatherhood community, and took time out to come here and speak to us about his whole situation, learning about his parents, learning about the things he went through, the trauma at birth. Really thankful, because it's an important story that we all need to hear. So there you have it, another fantastic episode. Thank you so much for listening, and if you have time, leave us a review. We'd love to hear what you thought of this episode or of the series as a whole. And don't forget, you can subscribe or follow using your preferred podcast platform to be first to hear the episodes. If you'd like to find out more about Dadvengers, head to dadvengers.com, where you can find out more information about our live chats, about our meetups, quizzes, blog posts, and more. This has been the Dadvengers podcast, sponsored by Tonka, because being tough is all about getting out and playing.